Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. We had mentioned when we did our initial video on this Mossberg Shockwave shotgun that we're going to do a couple upgrades to make it a little bit easier to use and make it a little bit more comfortable to use. So what I've got assembled here on the table are the various things that we're going to do, and as you can see from the video, the shotgun is unloaded and open, so there's no ammo around. But I'm going to show you the items we're going to put in, the tools that we're going to use, and go ahead and get these things installed, and then after we get the video we'll get it out to the range, test it out, and show you some follow-up. So to start with, I ordered some Talon grip material. This is just a 5x7 sheet. What it looks like that, and I know this isn't 5x7, I've already actually cut it, and I'll show you where I've already installed the grip and basically how I did that. The next thing that we're going to install is this TruGlo MicroTac red laser. Now you might think, well, you know, lasers are for precision guns and the shotgun's not a precision gun. You know, one of the misconceptions about shotguns is that you don't have to aim them. Even on this short barrel, the pattern's actually fairly tight, and you do have to pretty well point the thing in the direction you want the hole to go. And because a gun like this, with this grip and everything else, is really more suitable for holding down by your waist and shooting that way rather than holding it up in front of your face, even though this does have a bead sight, it's not all that useful. What the laser will let you do is, you know, no matter where you're holding the thing, the laser will allow you to aim it without having to have the sights in front of you. This little Picatinny rail adapter, this one happens to be a UTG, and I'll put all the various items that we put on this in the description of the video. There's multiple different ones out there. I've used this particular rail on other Mossberg shotguns and it works real well. And this is what we're going to use to install the laser. And then the last thing isn't really something that you necessarily install, but that you put in and out as you need to. This OPSol Mini-Clip allows you to use those little Aguila mini shells. And that's really helpful as you can get a lot more capacity in it, and it's also less recoil. And at the ranges that you're likely to use this, they come in birdshot, buckshot, and slugs. They're going to be every bit as effective. And this is something that you can put it in, use it, and pop it right back out again. There's really no tools involved. From a tools perspective, I'll show you some of the tools we're likely to use. For installing the Talon Grips, you're going to want some alcohol. I can get it in front of the screen here. This 91% alcohol, you can get it anywhere, and it's really good quality for removing oil and grease and stuff like that, so it sticks well. You also need a nice sharp utility knife, something like that, and this one you can see has been used a bunch of times, but it's got a fresh blade in it. And you're going to want some patches to put the alcohol on and to scrub the grease off. So that's what you would use if you're choosing to do the Talon Grips. And to install the rail and laser, you're going to want a flathead screwdriver, and this is an important note. See these screws here at the top? These, if it's a brand new gun and it hasn't got very many miles on it, they'll come right out. But if the gun's been around a while, you might have getting some dissimilar metal galling and heat stress that might make these stick in there. So make sure the screwdriver you pick, the blade fits the screw very, very well. You strip the screw out and it's going to get really unpleasant. So you want to make sure that you get a good solid grip on that head and that the screw pops right out. The other thing that you're going to want is a little bit of blue Loctite. Now it's kind of confusing. It's in a red tube, but it says blue. The blue is the important part, and the liquid itself is actually blue. You can see some of the residue there. Don't use the red, because if you use the red, you'll almost never be able to get it back apart again. And some Q-tips that you're going to need to use with the alcohol that also would have been used with the Talon Grip, and these are to get any lubricant oil out of the threads. And an optional item is this laser bore sight. This is a 12 gauge laser bore sight, and what it allows you to do is put this into the bore and get your laser on paper before you take it to the range to do the fine tuning. If you don't have one of these, you can do it without. It just makes a whole lot easier. So the next step of this is I'm going to field strip the gun. We do need to field strip the gun. We need to get the bolt out of there, if for no other reason than when we clean it and then we put the Loctite on it, we don't want that Loctite to get on the bolt. So I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to field strip the gun and then resume with the gun in a field strip position, and we're going to go ahead and put the rail on. Okay, so I've got the gun field stripped, and as you can see it's all empty, and now I don't have to worry about getting the stuff getting in my way when I'm trying to clean the threads and or getting the Loctite on the action. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these screws. And you'll see this one sticking up. Prior to the video I had gone through and loosened them all, broke them free, so that I wouldn't be spending time during the video fighting with the screws. And they should just back right out. And you'll see that they have a thread locker compound of some sort on them. Happens to be red. Hopefully that's not red Loctite. If it was, I probably wouldn't be able to back them out. But that, once that sets up good with a number of heat cycles and a little bit of dissimilar metal galling, you may find that it's nearly impossible to get these screws out unless you have a screwdriver that fits them perfectly. So, if this is a fairly new gun, you won't really probably have any problems with it whatsoever. So I've got the screws out. Now I'll save those for later. But now I've got my screw holes, and you'll see that they actually go all the way through. You can see the light through the... So anything you want, the two things you want to make sure of is when you put your screws in, that they don't protrude below the base of it. And this is thicker than it looks, because you don't want them to interfere with the action, and you don't want anything that you put on the screws to ooze down in and get into the action. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a Q-tip and some of this alcohol, drip it, put it onto the Q-tip. The easiest way to do it on this is got a little squeeze thing, is I just put it up against it, squeeze it, and then I'm going to clean out these threads to get rid of any grease or oil or lubricant that is in the threads. Technically it doesn't have to be the 91%, but the 91% works a lot more effectively, and it's not really any more expensive than any of the other alcohols that you can buy. Now it doesn't make very good for like rubbing alcohol, but really who uses it for that anymore? It's used to clean things, and it's used when you get a wound. And it works really good when you get a wound, even though it does really light your fire. Okay, so now what I've got done is I've cleaned out those threads, and now when I put the Loctite in, it's got a higher likelihood of working like it's supposed to. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the screws that come with the new rail, and I'm going to put some Loctite on them. And you don't want to be overly aggressive with the Loctite. You don't want it dripping off. It doesn't really take much, and all it needs to do is get into the threads. Now one of the things you'll find with this Loctite is it really likes to come out of here fast. So you put a little bit of Loctite on the threads, and I've got way too much, you see? But then you just use like a patch to give it a squeeze and take off the excess. So now I've just got it in the threads. You can see kind of the blue hint in the threads. You really don't need much more than that. That's about all you need. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and do each of the screws. You don't want to watch me Loctite, 4 different screws. But that's about all you need. And there's a little bit on the head that I'm going to take off as well. So I'll resume when I've got them all Loctited. The next step is fairly easy and less messy. You want to put the rail on. Now it's important that the rail's got 2 different orientations it can go. It can go this way, and it lines up basically with the front of the receiver. Or if you're not paying attention, you put it on this way, you'll see it kind of hangs over the safety, so it's wrong. So you want to make sure you put it on the right way. And just kind of line it up with the screw holes. Take one of the screws, doesn't matter which one of them, drop it in there. And of course you may have to use another hand to hold it, which is a little bit easier when you've got somebody else, and your hammer's going to reach out and hold down the shotgun for me. And I'm just going to put the screw in there, and I'm just going to gently drive it down until it's not completely tight, just kind of starting to seat, and that'll hold the rail in place. And I'm going to do all 4 screws. One thing to make sure of is, see how easy they're going in? I'm just basically spinning my fingers. There's no real tension on them at the very beginning. If you have to put torque on them at this early in the installation, then they're cross-threaded. Back off. You don't want to strip your receiver, and the receiver is aluminum, so it's relatively easy to strip it if you get them cross-threaded. And I'm just putting them in basically finger tight. Now that I've got them all in finger tight, the rail's in the right position, it's centered nicely. Take a look at it and make sure it's centered, then tighten the screws down and alternate them. So go front, rear, you can go rear, front, it doesn't matter. But what you want to do is you want to tighten them in alternating patterns and then make sure that they're all nice and tight. And you don't need to over tighten them. You want it solid, so you want it the rail doesn't move, but the Loctite's going to take care of the keeping them in place. It's not like you're torquing them in there and hoping that the tightness keeps them in place. If the rail's a little bit off, which this one is nice and straight, if the rail's a little bit off, that'll be okay. When you adjust your laser, it'll zero. So now I got the rail in place, and that was fairly easy. Let me clean up some of this mess and I'll get the laser out. This particular little laser, it came with batteries already in it, and then a little replacement battery stack, a mounting hex, and an aiming hex. And it's got, you know, a screw here for up and down, and then it's got a screw here for windage. But what this thing does, it's got two little buttons on it. And with those two little buttons, you can, from either side, so it's ambidextrous, you can turn the laser on. Get my hand in where you can see it. And so whichever button you hit, you can turn the laser on. And if you hit one of them and hold it for 3 seconds, it'll go to a strobing mode. And then if you hit either one of them and hold it for 3 seconds, it'll go back to normal. And you hit and release. So it's really easy to operate. And it's designed, this is the mount, and it can stick back. And on this gun, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up putting it way back at the end of the rail. Because what I want to be able to do is when I have a hold of the gun, I want to be able to reach up with my trigger finger and turn it on, or my support hand, but I want to have the option of doing either. So as long as the entire support is actually on the rail, it should be, you know, nice and solid and hold it. So all I'm going to do is, you know, wiggle it around till I get it on the rail, get it on at the back of the rail, and sometimes you may have to play with it a little bit to get it on. So now it's on. And slide it back and forth and make sure it doesn't move up and down the rail, and that means the screw, which is acting as the rail guide, is caught. And then I'm just going to tighten down the screw. And I'm not planning on Loctiting this unless I find out I need to. So I'm going to hopefully not need to Loctite it. So I just zip through getting it tightened down. And again, at the moment I'm going to try to avoid Loctiting it. If I have to, I'll back it back out and Loctite it. But I'm just putting it down reasonably tight. Now, the buttons, now that I've got it on here, it's a little easier to see. Here's the buttons. There's one on either side. And I can press either one of these to turn the laser on or turn the laser off. So what I'm hoping for is when I've got a hold of the grip of the shotgun, I can bring my trigger finger up, turn on the laser, or turn off the laser, or I can come over with my support hand. And because I'm gripping it back here, I shouldn't have to worry about hitting it. I'm going to hit the safety before, and I did that. I showed you that in the original video. I'm going to hit the safety before I hit the laser. So the next step would be to reassemble the gun and then zero it, and that's fairly straightforward. You put the bore laser in it, pick a spot that's roughly about the distance you want the laser zeroed at, and adjust it so the bore laser and this laser line up on top of each other. And now you've got it, you're on paper. And you take it to the range and fine tune it. Before I put it all back together and while I've got it apart, I'm going to show you what I did with the grip. What I did is I bought that strip, that 5x7 square, and as you know, this grip is kind of odd shaped, and it would be very difficult to coat the whole thing and may not even be desirable because you're going to get, you know, irregularities in it. So the center part is somewhat consistent right in here, and that's really where you're going to grab it. So you're going to get a hold of it right there in the middle. You want to be back away from the safety so you don't get up and get that little stamp on your hand. So I figured putting it right there in the middle, I'd be able to get it fairly level, and also it would really do the job, and it does. It makes a big difference. I have a hold of it here and trying to move it in my hand, whereas before it was kind of slippery. But the way I did that is I took a piece of paper, just regular printer paper, and I cut it into roughly the size, and then, you know, I could trim it and stuff like that. And when you put the grip on, there is no way to put it around perfectly like this and have it not bubble up. So what you're going to end up doing is putting it on kind of cockeyed, like this. You're going to put it on, I'm exaggerating, but you're going to put it on somewhat like that. And that'll allow you to get it flat. And of course you wouldn't do it quite to this extreme, but that's the concept. And then what you would do is you take a razor knife and run it right around here just lightly, bringing it around, and you notice what I'm doing is I'm kind of coming at an angle, and by the time I get around to the other side, I'm basically going to be right at the edge. Once you do that, then you take the razor knife and you actually cut right there, cut this piece loose right here, and you peel it back. And when you're done, what you'll end up with is a nice clean line. And then you do the same on the other side. So you start with that overlap, and then cut it back. And I put the two overlapping pieces, I actually let the wrap overlap itself as opposed to having a seam. Because if there's a seam, there's likely for sweat and stuff like that to get in between and pick it apart, and it'll constantly be peeling apart. By allowing it to overlap a little bit at an angle like this, it should be a lot stronger, it should stay on. But by doing that little trimming trick all the way around, it looks relatively even. It looks like like it was made for the gun. And when you grab a hold of it, it's nice and comfortable and you get a good grip on it. So that's one way to do the grips with the grip tape, and I happen to choose the rubber tape instead of the sandpaper. Figured it's going to get the job done, but it's not going to tear up your hands a lot. So at this point, the only thing left to do is put the gun back together and show you what it looks like all assembled. One thing I wanted to show you guys before I finish putting this back together, this is the fire control group or trigger assembly. That's the stock one for the 590, and it's polymer. And they work pretty well, but they do have a reputation of sometimes cracking up at this front end. And it might be less of a problem on a normal gun that you're going to use, where you're going to have your finger back here pulling the trigger. But this is going to kind of be a higher stress the way you're going to be pulling on it and using this gun. So we got our hands on the one from the 590A1. And these are real hard to find, but we were able to get a hold of one. And these are aluminum. And they're going to be much more durable and much less likely to crack up at the front under the stress that you put this kind of a gun under. It's just to drop in, when you field strip the gun, pull the old one out, I'll put the new one in, and once I drop it in place, then I will have it good to go. So now we've got ourselves a pimped out Shockwave shotgun. Now, one of the things I'll just kind of reiterate, I added some grip tape to the grip. That's fine. Don't replace the grip. The fact that this gun is not registered under NFA is the configuration that comes from the factory. The grip plays into it, the length of the barrel, don't shorten the barrel any further than it is, and don't put any forward grips on it. So you can put different things on the gun, but don't mess with anything that could void that ATF letter that Mossberg has and end up with you inadvertently on the wrong side of the law. One last thing before we go, I want to talk about a piece of gear not to get. I bought this Voodoo Tactical breacher scabbard, and it's listed as for pistol grip only shotguns, short barrel shotguns, and breacher guns. From a quality perspective, it does appear to be very well constructed. It's got molly, it's got a strap, and it's really well constructed. It's a nice piece of gear. However, there's one problem with it. When they talk about it being for a pistol grip only shotgun, they're really referring to true NFA short barrel shotguns. So when you put the shotgun in it, it goes in that far and the whole trigger group is exposed. And since this is the type of thing you'd sling it over your back, reach over your shoulder to grab the grip, over the shoulder, whip the shotgun out, having the trigger exposed is definitely not a good idea. It's just a couple inches too short for this purpose. So if you do have a true short barrel shotgun, the NFA, tax stamp, true short barrel shotgun, it'd be a nice piece of gear. But if you've got this or the Remington TAC 14 equivalent, I would not buy this. This is going to go back to Amazon because that's just not acceptable to have the trigger exposed. So the Voodoo Tactical Breacher is just a bit too short for this gun. Other than that, we're going to get this thing to the range, and we'll follow up with it, taking it to the range and showing you how well it works. We'll demonstrate the one last piece. Let me show you that. This little mini clip that we bought so we can do those Aguila shells, this is what it looks like. And unfortunately, the instructions on how to install it and remove it are on the inside of the packaging, so you have to destroy the package, so you're not going to use the package to store it afterwards. And the pictures aren't the greatest, but it's fairly easy to do. With an unloaded gun and the breech open, take the clip like this, so the ramp is facing that way. Just squeeze the wings, little tab wings here, push it in there, and then push it all the way to the back. And then what you'll see is under the lifter, it's kind of, the lifter is going to hit, it's going to cycle past it, and the shell's going to hit right here at the front of it. So when the gun cycles, See, the lifter comes up. So when the gun cycles, it's going to bring the shell back, hit that, and then flip it to stop it so that it sits on the lifter and then goes up into the chamber. So when we get it to the range, and by the way, you want to make sure it's all the way at the back and that stays in. So when we get it to the range, we'll talk about how well it works. I'm not going to load any ammo here at the house. And then the last piece of it is when you're done with it, put the gun with the gun open, just reach inside the ejection port, grab your thumb, pop it out. So off to the range we go. We got this thing out to the range with all of the enhancements on it, the upgraded trigger, the laser, everything we did to it. It ran flawlessly. The little adapter fed those Aguila short shells perfectly. They fed, they ejected, and everything just worked. The laser was pretty much dead on, and of course you'll get some variation depending on what load you're firing through it. But you can see from the shooting video that we'll put at the end of the video, everything just worked. So now I've got an actually much easier to use, easier to grip, more durable, and easier to aim little Mossberg Shockwave. So if you're looking for something that is not necessarily for a newbie, but something for home defense or just because, this might be a good choice. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you.